girl. And I say especially in the rural areas because, as you've mentioned, there are a lot of disadvantages for them because of their geographical location. So while the issues do cut across, they tend to often be left behind and caught up with a lot later on. So let's start maybe just looking at that. Olinda, let me let you answer that.
Well, from our standpoint, the first thing that comes to mind is their human rights. Their human rights are being breached fundamentally, especially in the rural areas in Zimbabwe. For example, what's been the talk of, on everybody's mouths these days is that the issues to do with child marriages. We are in a society that this 2021, we still find that a child by the age of 13 is deemed eligible to be somebody's wife, and that is very much unacceptable. So we are coming from a legal standpoint. When we look at the Constitution, we look at the young girl's human rights as a person, and we strongly feel that there has been a lack or a huge ignorance to respect those human rights that they are entitled to as young people or young girls in our community.
Okay, so when we look at, so you've mentioned that you also look at it from a kind of a legal standpoint. How does the OC Foundation come into trying to address these issues? Like what role are you playing actively in, and maybe if you are able to give us an example just to kind of set the picture up for our viewers as to what exactly we mean when we say, because it's very broad, human rights is very broad, and you have mentioned child marriages, but there's so many issues involved. So maybe just give us an example and how you come in.
The Olinda Chapel Foundation at the moment has got a team of 7 brilliant lawyers that have come together to volunteer their time, their resources, and their skills and knowledge to actually protect the girl child. So what we are offering is we've got a department called the Alternative Dispute Resolution, where we look at the different aspects of where human rights are being breached. For example, we would look at where, sometimes bringing somebody to book in Zimbabwe, unfortunately, is not as easy as A, B, C, and D. And there's a lot of hearsays that you can't do this because they're affiliated with this political party, or you can't do that, or there's no investigation that is there. Right. So what our team of solicitors or lawyers tend to do is, if they feel like that they have exhausted the criminal route to getting somebody, before a judge, they will approach it from a civil point of view. So what they do is they represent that girl child and represent her civil rights and take this into a civil court as a civil matter to make sure that that person that has breached their human rights pays one way or the other. It might not be in the form of going to prison, but it will be in the form of whether it's compensation, whether it's, some people just want to know that that person is guilty
and has been held accountable.
Somebody out there is saying they are guilty. So that's what our team of lawyers are doing under the Olinda Chapel Foundation. And we spoke with the Law Society. They advised us on how we go about it the right way, and we're working under their guardianship. They've been very helpful. So so that is how we are now approaching the matter, where if we fail to pursue the criminal side of those allegations, there is an alternative to that, which is the civil suit side of the law. So that's what we're pursuing.
All right. Now, one of the other aspects that comes in when we look at it, especially from a accountability standpoint, is also, while we may have legal hurdles, we also have family dynamics that come in. And especially in a community where there's, very strong patriarchy, and you want to hold a male member of a family accountable for something that they've done to their niece, their daughter, their granddaughter, and the family steps in. Okay, how do you navigate those situations? Even if it's not even necessarily something that's been done wrong, you're just trying to get this girl an education, for example. How do you navigate those waters?
So we have been battling with the existing social norms, scandals within our communities, and the harmful religious and traditional practices that have been in existence. And for me, the family setup plays a very critical role within the development of the girl child. And like I highlighted earlier on, that one of our key pillars is that of child protection. And for us, we are responding to cases of all forms of abuse, providing legal services, psychosocial support, escorts to the police, the hospitals, and also safe shelters. But then we realized that majority of the perpetrators are people who are closer to our young women and girls. Can you imagine what has been happening within the lockdown? Majority of these young girls we had their rights being violated by close family members, their uncles, their grandfathers, their brothers, and sadly for some, their fathers as well. And because we've already been battling with these deeply rooted social norms where there are no family structures, like there are no support systems in place, it became even more difficult. For some, yes, they would know where to report these cases, but then you do not have someone who's there to support you throughout until you get the case, you know, to a closure. And for some, we also have religion playing a very critical role where some of these issues are taken straight from the family and then through the churches, where they then, you know, do a sit down to say, how do we resolve this issue? And you're told to forgive a rapist, your own father, whom we know that at some point in time is going to go back into the family and do it again. And majority of these men who are perpetrators, they have a tendency of going back and doing the same thing. And with some families, you know, I would give you an example of a case that we handled whilst under the lockdown of a 15-year-old. Both parents are late, but the whole clan came from Kumusha coming to Harare just so they could sit down and receive a lobola, which is not fair. So what we have also been doing is that, you know, apart from raising awareness, you know, with regards to where we can report and creating safety nets for our young women and girls, we have also been raising awareness and having structures within the communities. We have the community development committees that we have set up, and these include community women, community men who are coming through to support, including the traditional leaders and also the religious leaders, to say, you know, family plays a pivotal role. If we are not there to support our young women and girls, give them education, support them in the event that their rights have been violated, there's nobody else who's going to come out there and come through to support our young women and girls. And we have also set up a system where we are trying to break the barriers in existence of the existing intergenerational gaps. I want to go back to the Anna Machaya case. You can imagine what has been happening with some of the apostolic sects. Their mothers got married when they were 14.
Yeah,
their
so
young girls are going through the same issue. And we have a book that was written, which is an experience of a young woman whom we helped. At 15, she got married, had a daughter. At the age of 15, the daughter got married as well and had her own daughter. It becomes a cycle. So you're trying to find a way to break that cycle as well. But also having male figures, you know, being the change makers in promoting gender equality and creating these safety nets has also helped us as well. That, you know, it's not just, yes, we are starting with the immediate family, but we are also going out there to the community at large to say, you know, like how we would grow up. And every other parent was so concerned about what's happening next door. So there now are programs and campuses, and includes everybody else from the community going to the church leaders and even the traditional leaders as well, because they play a very pivotal role. Imagine the power that they have within their community. So if you're going to go there and there's a function and the leader starts talking about the importance of protecting these young girls, it becomes something that is observed by the local people to say this is critical and important. So these are some of the initiatives that we have been doing, but taking a step further as well to say, can we include everybody else? Because during the lockdown, we then started doing our own wheels campaign, like info service, with the Ministry of Women Affairs, Labour and Social Welfare, VFU, police, and say collectively, can we go out there and spread the word? Because people are under the lockdown in their houses. But as we go out there and spread the message, everybody will hear it. They can come and seek the services, but also they are getting the information and knowledge that they want. And we are also coming through to cover the gaps that are in existence. So everyone has a role to play, but we are also facilitating for that.
All right. Olinda, just talk to me very quickly about the trauma. A lot of these experiences are experiences that shape us as we grow older, especially when these things occur, from a very young age. One example being what Eke has just spoken about, someone's mother got married at 15 and she thinks it's okay for her daughter to also get married at 15. Her daughter's going to get married at 15. What are some of the experiences of trauma that you've come across as you've been helping these young girls to kind of reset their lives?
It's before we even speak of the girls themselves that are actually in it, being the person that gets to be on the other side of the table and listening to their stories, it's been traumatic for me, whereby I've had to sit down with a therapist and kind of detox myself from the different levels of stories. So I can only imagine that if I am to describe a person's trauma, it's not deep enough for me to be able to explain, because what I have felt when I have listened to these stories, when I've watched young girls die because of, early child marriages, because of, just domestic abuse in those early child marriages, it's been very difficult for me. So you can only imagine how difficult it has been for that young person and what they've had to go through. I will give you a great example of 2017. We did a drive in Epworth, and there were so many stories that were coming up about there being child prostitutes. That didn't sit well with me, because there's no vocabulary or dictionary or even Wikipedia that you could go to that gives you a definition of child prostitution. There is no such thing as child prostitution, but there is everything to do with child abuse. So I didn't understand why people kept on referring to these young children at the age of 9, 10, 11 as prostitutes. So we did a drive, we went to Epworth. I sat down with these young girls and went through their experiences with them. A 9-year-old telling me that she's already HIV positive at her age because of a sexually transmitted disease that she got from one of her patrons, and that she gets paid 50 cents at a time. And that for them to be able to pay $30 rent a month, that meant they would have had to sleep with how many people? Just do the math.
Yeah.
50 cents a session to raise $30. That is quite a lot of sexual activity a 9-year-old would have to succumb to. And I asked them how they felt about it, that they've had to do this and they're doing this. And I got a very numb response, like their soul had already left. They were empty. There was no one there anymore. They were just this living, breathing person that felt nothing. And for a child at the age of 9, this is when they're supposed to start experiencing life, discovering new senses, discovering new adventures, learning new things in the world, because the world has got so many beautiful things to offer. But at that moment, they were so closed up, and as far as they were concerned, there really wasn't anything else to experience, because they had already experienced the worst of the worst by the age of 9.
That I can imagine that would be extremely traumatic. That's one of
as a mother, as a mother, listening to someone else's child say these things, it's heartbreaking. It literally shatters you into so many pieces, and most of the time you feel helpless because you do not know. You feel like you are failing them. You're supposed to be there to support them, and you are this decision maker that decides who receives what funding, because OCF is self-funded. It receives donations from Gain Healthcare, so predominantly we're self-funded. So you get to decide who you pay school fees for. You get to decide who gets medical attention. You have to decide with what you've got in the pot that this is the person that's going to be, who's going to have their life changed today. But because you change somebody's life today, you also have 100 others that are still looking at you and asking, what about me? When is my day coming? So that, I'm sure Patricia can agree with me. Your heart breaks literally every day. You wake up tomorrow, you go through the same process, your heart is broken again. So you are in this perpetual cycle of having your heart broken, because as a philanthropist that is out there to be a service to the community, you can't deliver things as quickly and as fast enough as you possibly can, like switching on a light on and off. 2020, there was a young girl that was 15 that fell pregnant. The young man, and this is sad because it's not just a female problem. It is another 15-year-old boy that got 2 girls pregnant at the same time whilst in full-time education. Right. Okay. So when I had the opportunity to sit down with the Deputy Minister of Child and Healthcare in Zimbabwe, Dr. Mangwiro, we discussed the issues about really revamping policies in Zimbabwe, right? To include things like child sex exploitation. We discussed issues about, revamping the training that is required by every health and social care provider. When I say health and social care provider, we're talking from nurses, doctors, teachers, to the playgroup leader at an ECD, right? To equip them to understand what child sex exploitation is, what grooming is, what kutamba chiramo in our culture is not okay, because that is grooming a child. That is,
Linda, sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off. Just, sorry, yeah. We do need to take a quick break. However, you are watching Thriving Heals on ZTN. We'll be back in a few minutes. We are looking at Thriving from the Grassroots, the story of the Zimbabwean girl. And as you can hear so far, it is very heavy. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You are watching Thriving Heals on Zimpaper's TV network. Now, please do make sure you are part of the discussion. Drop your comments in the comment section on the Zimpaper's TV network Facebook page or on Twitter at ZTN News. Now, today we are looking at Thriving from the Grassroots, the story of the Zimbabwean girl. And before the break, we did hear a lot of harrowing experiences that some of our young girls are experiencing, are going through before they've even reached the age of 16 in some cases. Okay, we've talked about some of these initiatives that are starting to be taken to kind of change this narrative, but is enough being done?
I think, Candice, we also need to look at the gains so far that have been done, at different levels within the communities, at policy level, and what's being done as well, even by the girls themselves. Maybe we were talking, and Olinda was talking at length about the issue of policies here in Zimbabwe. Maybe to acknowledge also that it's not like we don't have anything to work with. We do have the sound constitution that is there, and we know there is Section 70, which prohibits having sex with a minor. And that on its own, for now can be used to push and ensure that we have all perpetrators being where they are supposed to be. You may want to know that for us as an organization, since 2020 up until June 2021, we've dealt with more than 2,500 cases of gender-based violence, and these are cases that will be coming through, from different provinces of Zimbabwe, because we do not have like a jurisdiction. But also to say that...
Sorry, could you just give us a general age reference as well for the younger population, the younger end of the population in those cases?
Oh yeah, majority of these young girls are actually between the ages of 6 and 16. And with some, of course, also getting up to the age of 18.
Right.
And we know now that the challenge that we have comes through with the age of consent being at 16, and then we are still waiting for the marriage bill to be finalized as well. And the challenge also being with some of these perpetrators, if it involves someone who's 16, we know that it's either is going to get community service or is going to walk scot-free. And we know also that, you know, in communities where maybe it's within the rural setup, you're eventually going to see the perpetrator doing his community service work at a nearby hospital or at a nearby school. And unfortunately, with some of the cases we have had, we have seen the perpetrators doing community service exactly at the same school where the victim is, which also becomes a challenge. So it is our hope also that, you know, there is harmonization of these laws. It's a call to action and pushing for our government, you know, to expedite and have this issue at the center of discussion to say what is it exactly that can be done. And I'm also looking at the issue of the National Action Plan on Ending Child Marriages here in Zimbabwe, which has been endorsed by the First Lady as well. We know Ministry of Women Affairs has done quite a lot around such, and the establishment of the one-stop centers that has been done. And I'm proud to say also that, you know, our traditional leaders have had the opportunity to be capacitated around how our justice system works. You know, back then we would have a whole traditional leader calling in everybody to say, you know, you're just supposed to give a beast and then you can walk scot-free.
Right.
But 2 years back, we are proud to say, you know, they represented us quite well at the AU platform, where they were saying, no, we want to put an end to child marriages as well. But we feel there's a lot that can be done. You know, development partners can come through and give resources to ensure proper implementation of the action plan. But we also feel that the churches have a role to play as well, because there is this component of them being regularized. They need to be accountable,
right,
so that we know our girls, you know, safe when they are at the places of worship and they are not being taken advantage of.
Right.
And utilizing also the independent commissions, the Anti-Domestic Violence Council, the Gender Commission, you know, in terms of monitoring and evaluation, and also seeing that the component of research has been lagging behind. You know, sometimes we don't have the real statistics of how bad the situation is on the ground. Remember, we spoke about the issue of child marriages, and Olinda was giving a chronicle of how bad the situation is. We have young girls who are, you know, into prostitution. For me, you know, you can't call it child prostitution because these are children.
Yes.
It's just the same as sugarcoating child marriages and saying it's child marriages, and yet we know that it's rape. So it's also important, you know, that that component of research comes through so that we know how bad the situation is, because it's not just about them being you know, taken advantage of. There's also the component of them taking care of their
just 2 seconds. Let's just let her finish her train of thought.
It's them also taking care of their babies. And then there's the issue of them also lagging behind even in terms of their education. So they would also need to access education as well. So we also need to look into this. So there's a lot that needs to be done, even in terms of implementing certain policies that have been put in place. The Education Amendment Act, you know, so we need to ensure that everything is also provided for. Remember, the same girls also are losing 5 days of school because
Right.
they don't have sanitary pads.
Right.
They're losing 5 days of school because they don't have, you know, it's not just about the sanitary pads. Later we realize that, you know, in as much as we are going to give them sanitary pads, it's a complete kit that we're supposed to give them, the pens, the soap, and everything else. So this is where the gaps are, and I strongly feel that would need to push for that, you know, everybody has a role to play. But let's look at the gains, and let's look at the losses as well, and what is it that we can do as well to push for more and ensure that we are creating safe spaces for our young women and girls. Yeah.
All right, Olinda, I'll let you jump in now.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the losses outweigh the gains, and that is a very big worry. The reason why we don't speak much about what is actually being done in the communities is because nothing is being done.
So your
That
answer
is the
to my
fact.
question would be no, we're not doing enough.
No, nothing is being done. How come 2021 in Zimbabwe we do not have a sex offender register? How do you know that the person next door is a what do you call this?
Pedophile.
Is a pedophile? We don't have an active sex offender register. And these are some of the things that actually need to be done. So if we are to ask today, how many sex offenders do we have in Zimbabwe? No one can give us the figures. That means nothing is actually being done. We have to be outcome-based. And at the moment, in regards to safeguarding our young girls, we are not doing that. We're not looking at what positive outcomes do we want. The great thing about Zimbabwe, we've got a lot, we look good on paper. We've got the policies, we've got the constitution, we've got everything. Anything that you might want, if you are to look for it, it's there on paper, on policy, in the law. But is it being implemented? Because just having it on paper makes it worthless. It just makes it a piece of paper that's lying idle. But that constitution, the law, the regulations, the policies are supposed to be materialized. They're supposed to be used in our communities, and they're not being used.
All right.
This is why I say that there has to be a lot of training and a lot of education on those constitutions, on those policies, on those procedures for health and social care providers, so that they understand when and how a child's rights are being breached. How will they know if they're not being educated on it?
Now, Olinda, my question to you is, how do we now start to activate our communities to actively get involved? Because this is, as you said, we look good on paper, but the implementation is appalling at best. And this is because, you know, there isn't that much investment. A community will see a girl going through something and just say, how do we now start to activate our communities to get involved in these initiatives, to sign up and say, look, I am actively going to make it my responsibility to make sure that the girls in this community are well taken care of?
It is about running campaign awareness, issues out there, pushing these campaigns, because how will they know that wrong is being done if they don't understand the difference between right and wrong? I really strongly believe that the NGOs, and we've got plenty of them in Zimbabwe, NGOs, the Ministry of Health and Child Care, the Ministry of Justice, and all of these guys need to start creating campaigns. The same way that they run political campaigns is the same way they need to invest in educating the community as to what abuse is. Child abuse, sexual abuse, and sexual abuse now, this 2021, is not just on the girl child. We are having young boys being sexually abused as well. So how do they know what sexual abuse is? Because sexual abuse is only meant to be on the girl child, full stop. So the young boys don't even know when they're being sexually abused or being touched inappropriately and things like that. Right. So I really do believe that there also has to be consequences for actions. So a sex offenders register is a huge requirement in Zimbabwe. And we have also discussed things like having what we call a disclosure barring service, like we have here in the United Kingdom, where there's a centralized system that is there to register everybody's criminal history. That way, if you're going to apply for a job within a health and social care sector, whether it's in schools, whether it's in childcare, anything to do with children, you would be able to see your criminal history. So we know that you were convicted for rape, or you were convicted for sexual assault, or you were once investigated or suspected of such. That way, it actually helps us to safeguard our children in general, because we know who we are dealing with. It helps us weed out the perpetrators. It helps us build safer communities for everyone that is involved. And also, it is sort of like people understand the consequences of their actions, that if they are to do A, B, C, and D, if they get convicted of that crime, these are the consequences. There is prison. There is probability they will not be able to find a job as a teacher. Because some of the young girls that we find in high schools, Form 1, Form 2, Form 3, Form 4, teacher. It's the teachers, the male teachers, that they're in relationships with. So right. Teachers need to understand that they also have their career on the line, that if they get convicted, they will be sent to prison, and upon, live in prison, right? They will not be able to work in their field where they have gone to school for so many years to become teachers, because they are now a pedophile and are on the sex offenders register.
All right, thank you, Linda. Let me throw the same question to you, Eke. How do we get our communities engaged, involved in actively taking a role in taking care of our children?
I think it begins with each and every one of us. You know, you look at yourself and say, it begins with me. How am I treating? Because I've got 2 daughters back at home. Do I have time with my daughters? Do I spend much time with my daughters? We are the parents. We're spending most of our time at work, and we are out there doing a lot just to ensure that our girls are protected. But are we spending a lot of time with them? Do we know who they spend their time with? Do we know when they go for play dates or when they're going for dates, who are they with? There are issues of, you know, where some of our young girls have gone and have been taken advantage of, you know, when they go for dates, and they have, you know, issues of date rape. These things are happening. And we're also not opening up, you know, as parents, to say you can safely share your experiences with me as a parent. We're already creating a barrier where we don't even allow these young girls to come to, even the boys, like what Olinda was saying, you know, to share their experiences. Look at how social media was awash like the previous week with cases of suicide. You know, it's because they don't have sometimes someone to run out to who can you know, listen to them and understand them, that this is how bad the situation is. So as parents, it's important who our kids talk to, you know, when they are on the phones, when they are on internet and all. That's important as well. But also as communities as well, to go back to that initiative that I spoke about. You know, when we grew up, I grew up in Chitungisa, you know, the parent who would stay next door to our house was like a mother to me. So she would also look out for me. Instead of people then, I know social media is also helping sometimes in terms of alerting and saying these are the situations that we are facing in communities. But we can do much more than that to say, no, it's wrong, you know, for you to take advantage of a young girl or a whole family coming through and witnessing lobola of a 13-year-old or a 14-year-old. The majority of these young girls also under the lockdown have been used to you know, to become the next ticket meal for the whole family. How would a 13-year-old, you know, bring toiletries at home or bring you food? Where is she getting them from? You would also need to know the role of a child. She is a child. Let her be a child. You cannot expect her to be an adult as well. Within the churches as well, these are very important, you know, places of worship. Sometimes, you know, the gaps, the barriers that we create are just too much. Let's talk about these issues, the issues that are affecting our young women and girls, because at the end of the day, when we get to the end and we know they are in trouble, we don't then get to analyze why they ended up being there and what is it that can be done collectively, because it's not just about the development partners coming through to support, but the churches can play a very pivotal role as well. We spoke about the issue of period poverty. Can the churches make a difference? If there are churches that are from the elite side, can we also have them coming through, you know, to even support girls from the rural areas as well? We ran a paid bank campaign, which was quite successful from 2020 January. And we had said we wanted to raise 5,000 pads, and to date we have raised about 4,000. And these are individuals, churches who have come through, including the boys as well, from schools like Watershed, you know, who have come through to say, we also want to make a difference within these girls' lives. So I feel like everybody has that role to play, but also to say, you know, even within the government system, I think 2 years ago we were told that, you know, we're going to have an initiative where we're going to have sanitary pads being given for free. Up to now, we have had only one province that have also benefited from such, and I feel there is much more that can be done to expedite on that, so that we leave the girls without having room to think, where do I get my next meal? Where do I get my school fees? Where do I get sanitary pads when it's that time of the month as well? So that is also critical. And lastly, the issue of the Education Amendment Act. For me, it's quite critical, because then we have those girls who have been allowed to come back to school, but it's the society accepting it. You know, there's the issue of stigma amongst them as peers. Back at school, some of the teachers and the headmasters have not even embraced it to say this was they're allowed to come back to school.
And when they do go back, they still have to, you get something wrong.
Exactly, and you see them going back to the same perpetrators or situations. So everybody has that role to play. You are that school teacher, you are the pastor, who is supposed to make a difference as well.
Now, ladies, unfortunately, we are out of time. This discussion could have continued for much, much longer. So I will now you know, in conclusion, just let you give a final action call, and let anybody really who's watching who'd like to become a volunteer to become involved in some of your projects, let them know where they can find you. Olinda, I will start with you, but very briefly on your final thoughts, please.
My apologies. With the Olinda Chapel Foundation, we always take on anyone that wants to work with us. So it depends on your professional background. We've got a lot of projects that we're running. For example, we're also doing projects on mental health. Part of our legal team is looking into prisoners who've got mental health problems to make sure that their mental health side of their disabilities is being looked after whilst in prison. We are also running drug and substance misuse campaigns and getting a lot of our youths rehabilitated. So if you're a psychologist or a social worker or anything like that, feel free to come and join our team, and you will find us at www.the-ocf.co.uk.
All right, thank you, Olinda. AK?
Thank you so much, Candice. So you can be part and parcel of our various initiatives that we are running as Chamwari Mwana Scanner. And one exciting one is that of the Dandaroreva Scanner, which is done physically and also online. It's a platform for young girls to converse around issues that affect them, all these issues that we have been talking about, but having them at the center of decision making as well. So you can go and look out for our pages on Facebook, Twitter, also our website, www.syazim.org, on how you can become part of our Dandaroreva Scanner. You can also join our men's and boys forums, because we believe in catching them young as well. So the boys do have a role to play, but the males as well in promoting gender equality. We are also working with community development committees within our different areas of operation. The most component key as well is that of sustainable livelihoods, which has helped also come through, you know, to ensure that yes, we are raising awareness, responding to cases, but some of the push factors, like we highlighted, are the issues of poverty. Right. So as we catch them young as well, these young girls are learning to do things on their own, doing various projects that also support them, including their mothers and guardians. So you can also become part of our community development committees, but you can also contribute towards our initiatives, the pet banks that I spoke about, stationery, schoolwear, towards our disadvantaged girls. And we have an exciting project that's coming up. We are building a one-stop center entirely for young girls below the ages of 18, a comprehensive approach towards responding to cases of abuse. So you can always come through, even if you want to volunteer and become part of it. But what I would want to say is we all have a role to play and make a difference in the lives of our young girls, because they are the change that they want to see in the world, and the change the world wants to see as well.
Thank you so much again. Thank you so much, Olinda, for joining us. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Hopefully you have realized by now that, as Eke has finally said to us, everybody has a role to play. And what role are you taking? Have you thought about the impact that you can have in a young person's life, just based on who you are? If you think you can be of use to anybody, why not? Just go ahead and do it. My name is Candice Mwakaliele. Thank you for watching this edition of Thriving Heals from myself, the crew behind the scenes. Be kind to each other, but be kinder still to yourselves. We'll see you next time.